Çağdaş is the founder of the Posthuman Lab and a founding co-editor of the Journal of Posthumanism. And currently he teaches humanities and social science courses at Yorkville University. He's also a researcher at the University of Toronto, where he works on a project at the intersection of technology, politics, and posthumanism. He is also an affiliated researcher at the Posthumanism Research Institute, the Center for Critical Research on Religion, and previously he worked as an assistant professor of political science in Istanbul, Turkey, as well as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Florida. He focuses on politics, ethics, and technology with a particular emphasis on ecological transformation. And so today's talk is Posthumanism for Sustainability. So I'm going to pass the mic to Çağdaş, and you can start sharing your screen as well for your presentation.
Thank you so much. I think we are ready to go. Good afternoon, everyone. Before starting, I would like to acknowledge the land. I think we are now gathering on the territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon, One Poo agreement. I also want to commemorate the victims of the earthquakes happened last month in Turkey and Syria, and extend my condolences to the families and humans and more than humans and their families for sure. So this sad event, series of events, earthquakes also brings us an interesting moment in terms of thinking why we need a radical sustainability today in terms of urban sustainability as well. This talk will not focus on directly focus on urban sustainability, but these earthquakes showed once again how fragile our systems are against the forces of nature, and how ignorant and negligent our politics is in terms of providing care for the humans and more than humans against the natural or unnatural events. So this systematic level problems brings us to think about sustainability in terms of onto-epistemologies and ethics as well. That's why today's topic will be mostly related to this specific aspect of the problem in general. Let me come back to my screen as well. Okay. All right. Posthumanism for Sustainability is the first project of the Posthuman Lab, and also it was supported by Yorkville University's scholarly activity funding. So I appreciate this. I also feel grateful for today's invitation, Dr. Dedeoğlu and Posthuman Research Institute. I believe Brock University is one of the few right places to talk about sustainability from the perspective of post-humanist thinking and practices. That's really important. And honestly, this project idea came to me after I read Dr. Dedeoğlu's article on posthuman sustainability with Olga Sielemetka. So it's really important for me to mention this, and I am really grateful for being here today. And in the last couple of minutes, I will talk two aspects, two components of this project. One is the scoping review that's published as an article. Hopefully it will come out in a few days at the Journal of Posthumanism, and also the digital repository that we have been curating for a while since last year. And we started with the content we created based on this project, Posthumanism for Sustainability, and it's an ongoing project. So we are happy to receive new contributions. If you think any relevant publication recently come to forefront in terms of the intersection of sustainability and posthumanism, we will be happy to add it to our repository as well. So first with the scoping review, it started with one question: why do we need a project? For sure, for posthumanism and sustainability. And the basic reason, especially with the pandemic, it became more prominent that we need to find ways to achieve 17 goals of sustainable development, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But although various scholars from different scholarly perspectives have been doing sustainability-related work, it's still obvious that we are not making progress in terms of achieving these goals. In different contexts, there are different problems, but for the sake of this project, the main problem is how we think about sustainability. In today's world, especially after the pandemic and after different interactions with different aspects of problems, economic crisis or political regression and everything, we need to ask which sustainability and for whom. So these questions are the first questions we ask, and we build upon these questions in this project. So the purpose was twofold: to scope the related literature and synthesize the knowledge that may help reduce the risk of relying too much on biased values of humanity in seeking sustainability. This was the first purpose. And the second one, to disseminate this knowledge through various means. Of course, the website was designed for this reason, and the digital repository was also launched for achieving this purpose. And we asked 3 questions for the scoping review. The first one: what has been said so far in these studies linking posthumanism and sustainability? How has the literature evolved in the last decade? What are emerging themes, potential research gaps, and scholarly issues? This was also important for us, and I will mention this at the end of the talk. And scoping review, in terms of methodology, we focus both on quantitative and qualitative aspects, and our starting point was to provide a protocol, and it's now registered with osf.io. So this gives us a chance to engage with scholars, and also this protocol clarifies our selection criteria, our research questions, our purposes, how we approach to this project. And we wanted this protocol to help with the future research, and hopefully it will be beneficial for other research efforts. And in terms of screenings, the scoping review, of course, relied on 2 levels of screening. One is a general screening with help of 3 research assistants. We gathered raw data from different databases, and we've only focused on peer-reviewed publications until June 2021. So if you think after June 2021, an important work at the intersection of posthumanism and sustainability was published in a journal. So we can add this to our digital repository as well. So initially, we came up with 4,474 works. And when we extracted the duplicated publications, we ended up with 4,419 works. And they were all uploaded to Zotero. Each researcher individually focused on this raw data to make their own selection based on the inclusion criteria we decided. Our inclusion criteria were very basic. We wanted to keep it basic. We created two chunks, one for posthumanism, one for sustainability. That means we searched for keywords related to posthumanism. That means post-humanities, post-anthropocentrism, post-duality. And for the sustainability, we did the same. Instead of sustainability, maybe green ideas or nature might be used or ecological might be used. So we search for these keywords as well, but we only selected the papers that really focused on the intersection of these two dimensions, post-humanism and sustainability. And if there is a rigorous discussion within the paper regarding these two aspects, we selected them, and we ended up in the second screening with 45 articles. Two of them is in French, and the rest is in English. We also conducted research in Greek and Turkish. We couldn't find any peer-reviewed article. There are books and other gray literature, but not peer-reviewed articles were published at that time. So after this second screening, this time all of us, including myself, we read each paper, 45 paper, in a detailed way to understand how they approach sustainability and how they do this methodologically, ontologistically, which preliminary ideas they are relying on, which assumptions are coming forefront. So these were our main concerns during the second screening and the reading, thorough reading process. And after making this detailed reading, we incorporated Vossweaver into our analysis. Vossweaver helps us for understanding the curated data as a network. That means 45 papers, how they speak to each other. That's what we try to understand using Vossweaver and visualize the data. You will see the visualized data very soon. The idea was that looking at their abstracts and keywords, how frequently some concepts are being used, and how co-occurrence of keywords are happening. This was our primary purpose using the Vossweaver visualization. Before describing the data in terms of co-occurrence and their interaction with each other, a little bit conceptual background. We use two basic concepts, sustainability and posthumanism, but of course these two concepts are too broad and almost becoming buzzwords. So we needed to clarify what we are talking about. And sustainability, of course, has been with us for many centuries. Since 17th century, it first appeared in German. We are talking through sustainability, and since last century, 20th century, with the impacts, environmental impacts by humans have been increasing, sustainable development has become one of our buzzwords again. But it mostly, even if it's relying on three-pillar understanding of sustainability, environment, society, and economy, economic growth has always been much considered, or it's part of the business type of thinking, and it's becoming more and more corporate responsibility thinking. So we wanted to find an alternative to this understanding. This was our main concern. And when we look at how sustainability is being projected, there are three distinct approaches to it: status quoist, reformist, and transformationist. So our project, of course, is coming closer to the transformationist understanding of sustainability, which is not about reforming, making slight changes to the system, or keeping up with the business as usual, but changing our understanding and our practices about sustainability. So we wanted to see how post-humanist approaches to sustainability can guide our way doing this. And also this is about three different imaginaries of the future: modernization, transformation, and control. They are like in an interplay, right? Some policies are like modernist, transformationist, or they seek control. They may be together. They may go hand in hand in some situations. But of course, our project is also located in the transformation aspect of the future projection. How we project future is not independent of how we practice it today. So it's also about the past experiences. How we imagine the future is related to our previous experiences and current political and economic practices. So we are trying to transform our minds and practices simultaneously. When we look at posthumanism, of course, diversification is the case. It's very diversified. So we are talking about posthumanisms in plural sense today. And we want to see it that way as well. But main concern has been mostly ecological concerns. And in the scoping review, these articles, selected articles, have also a similar concern of ecology. And this is the priority for many of them, I must say. So the main question is always about how we think and act about humans and humanity at all. So we start criticizing humanity and human-based understanding of values and systems. We are trying to decentralize our understanding in that way. But we are still confused, general audience, and also in academic circles, about posthumanism as an ism, as an ideology, as a theory, or as a philosophical approach. So we don't define it as a theory or as an ideology. We want to define it as a world that combines philosophical, artistic, political aspects into one plural world. So that's our take on in general. And in this sense, we are differentiating the posthumanist posthuman from the transhumanist posthuman, although both of them are starting from a centered notion of human and humanity. They are going different ways, as you know. And the transhumanisms or transhumanist understanding of the posthumans entanglement, too much entanglement with neoliberal politics, we want to keep our distance with this understanding and focus on the posthumanist understanding of the post-human. And we attempted a definition of the posthumanist post-human in the paper. It exhibits critical, ecological, inclusive, and post-secular features in expressing both the state of becomings of bodies together and the historical and structural situation in which various becomings become possible. This implies that the fundamental premises of the dominant interpretations of both monotheistic religions and humanist and enlightenment sciences are open to criticism. It also implies that the transhumanist vision, built on the assumption of human, in fact, some human superiority, and integrated with neoliberal advanced capitalist dynamics, needs to be criticized. Because in today's world, new injustices are being added to ongoing systematic ones. Far from solving problems completely, as some claim, techno-solutionism also paves the way for the emergence of new problems and risks. So based on this definition, we interpreted the 45 selected papers. This was our guiding definition, and we try to see, of course, each paper in its own context, because they are differing in terms of disciplines, as you will see soon, in terms of main questions, methodologies, etc. But what brings them together was the ecological concern. And on this slide, you see the distribution of these papers in terms of publication year. As you see, 2019 is the top year in terms of publication number. There are 10 papers published in 2019. The first paper was published in our selection, of course, selected to our corpus, was published in 2005, and in the beginning of 2010s, it's not that much popular looking at this interaction, but since 2015-16, it has been becoming more and more important to look at the intersection of posthumanism and sustainability. I guess with the pandemic, the publication efforts, research and publication efforts have been affected a little bit, but again, since 2001, in the journal and in other journals, I also witness still prominent interest in this intersection, which is very important. In terms of fields of study, in the article we published, we give a long, detailed content of selected articles. You can check it when it's available. You can also check the Posthuman Labs website for the repository. You can see the selection there as well. But here I will summarize within the humanist disciplines, not from a posthumanist, unrationalized, undisciplined version, but from a disciplinary version. Education is the first field of study, first area, first discipline. We see 17 papers out of 45 published in the field of education. 9 published in philosophy, 3 in ethics and environmental humanities, sociology, politics, urban planning, 2 of them, each of them, and the rest is business, law, design, food studies, archaeology, media studies, and organization studies. So there is a diversity. So this is the number one finding. There are diverse ways of doing sustainability study from a posthumanist perspective, and in different fields we see some good examples of it. And also theoretical assumptions and methodologies are diverse. Out of 45 articles, 36 of them departing from posthumanist assumptions. This is much clearer. But for 4 of them, they are taking more critical humanist approaches. Although they are using posthumanist lens, they do not totally ignore humanist prioritizations. That's an interesting finding too. And 5 of them are in transition. In terms of methodologies, all of them have a strong theoretical aspect. Some of them only have using other methodologies to support the theoretical discussion, case studies, document analysis, interviews, content analysis, media analysis, and multi-species ethnography are the methodologies, diverse methodologies used in these works. How we documented the interaction between keywords in the articles, in the abstracts, especially. One difficulty was that, especially literary criticism works, I guess the ones published with MLA, they don't have abstracts. So we used their first paragraph instead of abstract. That was a difficulty we faced when we are doing, when we were constructing the networks of linked keywords. This might be a little tiny to check the details, but of course, sustainability and posthumanism are the main keywords when you pay attention. And this interactive network of linked keywords again proves the diversity of the research fields, if we call it that way. If posthumanism, sustainability interaction is an emerging field, it's diverse. So we can also see it there on that screen. And when we look at emerging themes, of course, we have some foundational studies. Posthumous sustainability as a keyword coming from Kilemeka and Degel's 2019 work. Nomadic subject is still very relevant when we talk about posthumanism, sustainability, interaction. Alaimo's criticism of sustainability is very important in this discussion. Environment sustainability discourse and practice is becoming more and more an environmentalism without environment, ecology that excludes non-humans. This is still one of the foundational assumptions or themes. Neymanis et al.'s work on 4 problems of environmental humanities is also another starting point for many of the published work. And Benel's et al.'s criticism of post-Western posthumanism and its ignorance when it comes to indigenous knowledge and practices is another foundational text. But this is not all. In different fields, different scholars are going different directions, departing from these initial themes and questions. And when we look at other themes, we see existential and materialist ecological imaginations of the post-Anthropocene, for instance, or reproductive sustainability based on flat ontology, sustainability of Gaia, with a focus on radical contingency. And with specific chapter, ecological education for sustainability, we see again emerging themes of subjectivity, posthumanist ethics, natural culture, curriculum-related changes, more than human curriculum and research practices. So these are giving us a map of emerging themes, and you can again check out the details in the paper and on the website. And when it comes to see how these different themes are speaking to each other, we use co-occurrence network analysis. So again, it's small. Hopefully you will have to zoom in later. We extracted posthumanism and sustainability as keywords from this visualization because they were obviously the most repeated, frequently used keywords in the network. So we extracted them. When we extracted them, 5 clusters emerged. The first one, the red cluster, is occupied around practice as a theme. So you can see Anthropocene as tied to practice, learning as tied to practice. So these different teams, sub-teams, are becoming part of the practice cluster. The green one is perspective cluster, and you can see how other sub-teams, environmentalism, climate change, for instance, are becoming interacted with the cluster of perspective. That means, for instance, we need to change our perspective when we look at climate change. This is something frequently repeated in different articles. This is what this network analysis means, basically. And for nature cluster, we have the blue part. You can see different sub-teams in interaction with nature. Again, anthropocentrism, for instance, one of them. The yellow is species cluster, and you can see agency as part of this cluster, for instance. When we talk about species, we mostly think agency as a question in mind, and also multi-species justice as a question in mind. So these are how different teams are examples of how different teams are speaking to each other in the corpus of our data. And the final cluster is, of course, the criticism of human bias and human-centered values. So around this theme, again, we see sub-teams, and obviously education is coming closer to the critique of human and humanity in this sense. So what are the main findings from these descriptive notes? The first thing is that, of course, the corpus of papers reflects inter and transdisciplinary visions, and these visions are entangled with ecological concerns, sustainability-related concerns, and this brings us to the emerging field of environmental posthumanities, as Dedeoğlu recently put it. And these critics, I think all of them, from different perspectives and based on different concerns, are inviting us to think beyond sustainable development policy and practices. That's important. All of them are doing this in their own way. Some of them is looking at the university, and university's sustainable development policies, which are mostly just remained on paper, or some others are looking at global south, some others looking at indigenous communities. But the main concern is that sustainable development, or today's sustainability policies, are not enough, and we cannot just reform them. We need a radical transformation, which is related to, of course, ontological and ethical transformations and political legal options to do this. And another finding, which is obvious now, the selected articles and their approaches to sustainability are very complex and reflects a diversity. So this is also important. And when we try to read these evidences after deconstructing everything, now I am trying to reconstructing things. We use 5 thematic categories. 3 of them you should be familiar. It's already prominent in posthuman thinking proposed by Ferrando before, posthumanism, post-anthropocentrism, and post-dualism. But we also need to think through post-enlightenment and post-technology. So posthumanism is about, of course, thinking about life and mode of existence beyond humanism's exclusionary definitions of humanity, less and being less or more human. In this sense, for instance, from ecological matters of fact, we need to go towards ecological matters of concern. So our factual problems or our apparent ecological issues should be translated into matters of concern, and we need to act upon them. So this is one area of discussion, or one thematic category, and it's of course sub categories. And the second one, post-anthropocentrism, it's about a vision of life and relationships beyond the human species. And in the corpus, we see articles focusing on just sustainability, ecology is of sustainable concern, or policy as assembly, which are criticizing anthropocentrism in their own way, from environmental justice perspective, from organizational studies perspective, or from a sociological, feminist sociological perspective. Also, we have post-dualist approaches among these papers, which means symbiotic interfaces of nature culture, human animal or human machine. Of course, different papers do this differently, but there's a general understanding of seeing the world as interfaces, not West, East, or nature, culture distinctions, but as interfaces. And in this sense, again, from the corpus, sustainability research, fields of education, heritage, technology, these are some areas that the authors try to apply a posthumanist lens. And we also see the story of matter at various scales should be translated into a post-dualist imaginary of the world, and maybe in the sense future imaginaries. And when we look at post-enlightenment, we already know that the discrete, autonomous, free individual of the Enlightenment never existed, and the papers also, most of them based on this assumption, relational interpretation of sustainability, embodied learning, place-responsive pedagogy, and curricula. These are all discussing human subjectivity and humans as learners from a critical post-humanist angle, which is also looking at post-enlightenment vision. And also Meggs and Robinson and Forlano or others, they are looking at the policy aspect, the design aspect from a post-enlightenment subjectivity perspective, which is very crucial for our research as well. And lastly, post-technologism is about not to be mesmerized by technology and not to lose sight of its close relation with socio-ecological injustices, with neoliberal practices, and so on. And in this sense, sustainable bioethics, the sustainable body, or cities without citizens, in their own understanding, criticize technologos and try to bring fresh perspectives to the discussion. And you can access these articles and read, of course, for your own purposes. And finally, we ended up looking at three concerns regarding the field and the interaction between fields. These are three immediate issues that we need to address if we want to come up with better alternatives for sustainability in academic circles and beyond it. So that's the purpose in this last section. How we can look at the interactions between different onto-epistemological approaches and what ethical issues might be relevant to the discussion. And the first one was the lack of dialogue between different, epistemic communities, especially between critical humanists and post-humanists. This can be seen. This is why we wanted to include for critical humanist perspective into the corpus, because they are doing very important criticism of human-centeredness, anthropocentrism, duality in our thinking, etc. But they do it in their own way. And when we look at different aspects of, for instance, feminist scholarship, new materialism versus Marxist materialism, or eco-feminism, they need to speak to each other more. That's our, at least, take on. And we want to emphasize this, encouraging more dialogue between critical humanist and post-humanist scholarship based on the idea of onto-epistemological plurality. And the second thing, we still lack clarity in terms of the concepts we use. We see this in some papers in our corpus too. For instance, we are looking at the post-human city. We conceptualize it that way, but we do not pay enough attention to the critical post-humanist scholarship. We only use transhumanist scholarship to do this. So these are creations for the reader as well. And if we want to see a flourishing field, then we need to address and work towards conceptual clarity in the field. And the third aspect is advocating posthumanism's meaningful interaction and engagement with indigenous worldviews, traditional ecological knowledge in a multidimensional and multi-temporal manner. It's not about the past. It's not about the future either. It's about now and then, and we need to take solid action together. We need to do this together from an activist standpoint. In this sense, this is part of the politics of academia as well. In the age of neoliberal acceleration of knowledge production and everything, we need to do justice to different epistemic communities and try to bring them together for solidarity purposes. And finally, the other component of the project, I am keeping this short. You can Google it and see it yourself. We launched the digital repository for posthumanism for sustainability project last year. So 45 articles are listed there. There are also some other projects, ongoing projects. You can find some details. And I guess tomorrow or early next week, the paper will be out too. You can check it with the Journal of Posthumanism. And finally, my research team, this project, as I mentioned, was funded by York University, and thanks to this support, I could work with these wonderful people. Nicoletta has become a long-term collaborator and a colleague, so we also co-authored the paper. We did it together. Cassandra and Sinan helped us with the screening process, the data selection and creation process. So I am grateful for this as well. I think that's all for me. If there are any questions, or I don't know how it works, I am happy to answer.
thank you very much, Çağdaş. Yes, you can ask your questions in the chat if you have any, for those of us who are on live stream. But I will start maybe with folks in this room. I do know, I don't want to put anybody on the spot right now, but I do have a question. I really like how you were talking about the need for a conversation. Well, you point to the need for multiple conversations, and one of those is a conversation that goes well beyond the typical fields in which posthumanism activates itself. So the need to talk to engineers and scientists and natural scientists, because the problems we are facing with regards to sustainability obviously exceed any one field. And so I was involved in a project, still involved in a project called Beyond Sustainability, actually. And the subtitle is Radical Transformation Through Systems Thinking. And the team we assembled was of that nature, and trying to activate a discussion where we are really thinking in terms of changing the fundamental worldview that currently informs the SDGs, for example, right? If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, they are human-centered. They are not only human-centered, but very much economy-centered. And so how to change this very fundamental way in which we see the world, and through a conversation between critical humanists and posthumanists. I like that angle. It's an and rather than an either or. So, but how, I guess my question to you, right now it's been commentary, but my question would be, how? How do we make it work? And I'm not being facetious, because I find that it's a big challenge. So your thoughts on this? Your microphone is off. Yes.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I have been thinking about it too. And my short answer, by doing this and other things. And also I'm trying to be involved as a, of course, kind of humanities scholar, interdisciplinary scholar, with the designers and engineers in a way, how maybe we can help them, or we can learn from them in terms of challenges while designing things or doing things better, or doing things beyond human-centered perspectives. This project at the University of Toronto with colleagues is in a sense touches upon it in a different way, but it's related to posthumanism, politics and technology interaction, and we are looking at protests all around the world. I am looking at Turkey and Boğaziçi protests with other colleagues, and we are trying to see how protests and activism, digital or physical campus activism, can be posthuman. And initial remarks can be like, they are already posthuman. We just don't know. We are using technology. In Turkish context, dogs are part of campus dogs are part of the protest. Weather was part of the protest. For instance, one of the most striking images from the protest on social media was the moment one of the professors protesting the rector was almost flying because of the weather conditions. you know what I mean. This is already post-human, but we need to think more about it and just frame it that way. And this framing is also about redisciplining our minds in a way that, okay, this is already post-human, but in a different paper, I was trying to differentiate being exposed to post-human condition and being an actor in it. So these are also different things. If I don't bring a post-humanist perspective to the post-human condition, then there are some costs, some really problematic consequences. And for instance, we witnessed some of these consequences in the earthquakes as well. Aftermath, in the aftermath of the earthquakes, especially. Earthquakes themselves are also part of the post-human condition, but we do not necessarily see them that way because they are historical situations as well. They are not a new event in this respect. But the digital environments, entangling with the earthquake framing, the post-earthquake situation in terms of more than human interactions, and our relation with the matter, materiality, with the concrete, and with the people, with the voice, with the technologies, voice technologies, and other things. These are things that we need to recalibrate our understanding in politics, and this is part of sustainability, for me at least. This is part of urban sustainability. This must be the heart of it. Otherwise, we will see more consequences, and most of them will be deathful. I think, yeah, I can say this is not only, this shouldn't be only a dialogue between critical humanists and post-humanists. We already do this in a sense. We need to increase it, and we need to show it to others. And when I mention this dialogue, of course, in the paper, it's based on scholars from critical humanist circles and post-humanist circles, but I also know that the designers and engineers that I mentioned at the beginning are also critical humanists. Even though they are not post-humanists, they are critical humanists. So when I think about this dialogue, I also think about their engagement with us and our engagement with them. That's why I guess this is the new challenge in front of digital humanities. Digital humanities should be transformed in a way that it engages more with computer science people. Otherwise, it will be obsolete. They need to speak to each other because they don't speak the same language. When a computer scientist uses human as a keyword, it uses it almost in a technical sense. But we do not. We have many connotations, and in real life, when they produce a product or a software, an application, whatever, these connotations are also they must be considered. They are at work, whether it is related to disability, accessibility, whether it is related to attention economy. We are seeing the challenges, we are witnessing the consequences, so we need to focus on the design aspect. And I guess some good work has been done already. We need to focus maybe more on them from a post-humanist perspective.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I think your point about the necessity to engage in conversation across fields is so fundamental because, as you say, computer scientists, it doesn't mean the same thing to human, say the philosopher does, or even the biologist, or business person. And so those can be conflicting. Those having a conversation, but in fact you're not, because you're not using the terms in the same way. But I'm going to turn to the audience, and again, a reminder for those who are on the live stream that you can ask your questions in the chat. Brian Lang, thank you, fascinating as always. So not a question, but a comment here. Questions from the audience.
I was interested in your conceptualization.
Fiona, can you approach? Oh, yes, sure. For the sound.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I was interested in your conceptualization humanism methodology and sociology. Why does it limit to that sort of methodologies of each of its approaches? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Of course, my understanding might be different than those authors who published the selected articles, but in a sense, at least ideally speaking, these 5 thematic clusters must be at work in our methodological approach. Posthumanism, post-anthropocentrism, post-dualism, and in terms of subjectivity and agency, a critical position. As a researcher, our place in the research, are we participating in as an active individual? Are we paying attention to other factors? And then, of course, our critical approach to technology use and accessibility and other purposes. I cannot say each of these papers have clear methodological positions with respect to posthumanism. Some of them, especially in the field of education, multi-species ethnographies, case studies, Malone's paper, for instance, doing an incredible kind of case study, but also supported with field notes with children and dogs in the city, La Paz, I guess. So there are really inspiring methodologies in this sense. We are looking beyond adults. We are looking beyond humans. We were talking about it. Children's are not paid enough attention until they become adult, and then we are paying more attention than that is necessary when we are becoming adult. So we need to find a way to balance this. We need to pay attention to kids' agency more, and our own agency as adults, not that much. So this type of, I guess, nuances are important in making research, and this should also be reflected by the ethics reviews, ethics board reviews, and mostly questions, even in Canada. I always find it interesting when it says when you do a research with humans, review board should see it. Okay, what about non-human? More than humans. So this is still tough parts. We need to find some practical ways to attend discussion with these questions. But the diversity of methodologies in these works really inspired me. This is important. And I, for instance, for my side, I didn't know that I can take more than I expected from the field of education for my own interest in terms of citizenship studies and its engagement with posthumanism. So these are some enlightening moments for me as well. And yeah, in terms of methodologies, this is also true. I think That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for your talk. You mentioned at the beginning that you're looking to historical analysis to how this changed. So could you speak a little bit to that? And as well, just some keywords, themes, or that in your step one and step two of step one and step two from an article from 45, like what were key themes that ended up being tangential to the work?
Very, very good question. Thank you. Our criteria, as I mentioned, it was simple because of keeping it that simple. Posthumanism and sustainability and related concepts. I guess this 4,000 was the result. It was too broad, but mostly it was like maybe sustainability is just seen in one place in the article. It's not really part of the conversation, or vice versa. Posthumanism maybe never used that way, but posthumous sometimes is used as an adjective, so it becomes part of the corpus, initial corpus, because just posthuman is used, or transhuman is used, or anthropocentric as a keyword is becoming very popular. As you know, Anthropocene has become a buzzword as well. That's why a broad part of the initial corpus was related to Anthropocene discussion. And of course, we can go this direction too, but I think I agree with Dedeoğlu and others in their criticism of Anthropocene as a philosophical concept and as a geological concept. I tried to think about it too, or through it too, in previous stages and in different papers. It might be helpful, but I decided to take a step away, and we took a different path in doing this research. That's why we excluded Anthropocene-related works. Of course, some of them are part of the conversation, part of the final corpus, because they are clearly focusing on posthumanism and sustainability while still talking in terms of Anthropocene and, you know, this whole human-dominated era. But it doesn't seem very helpful thinking that way. There are a couple of important criticisms in terms of infrastructural thinking, environmental infrastructures, how we discipline our minds, and how Anthropocene as a geological and philosophical concept is also becoming an environmental infrastructure to further our thinking. Then we cannot undo some assumptions or some thinking. That's why I am trying to undo nowadays the Anthropocene related thinking and trying to see it maybe in a more multi-temporal way. That's why we excluded, for instance, these articles. But they are on my Zotero, so we can share them. Maybe we can put them on a shared folder. Maybe some copyright issues might be relevant, but we can work on them. Thank you for the question.
For your answer.
Yeah, thank you. With regards to the scene, in particular, as a concept, as a term, it is such a controversial name for the geological. I mean, it's required to mean that was the name. Of course, criticized and all other neologisms come up, right? Like the Capitalocene, the Endocene, the waste scene, which is one of my favorites. I think, of course, you know, here at the human, they're right there that thinkers need to be interested in, but not just in terms of criticizing the term itself, but really actively thinking for sustainability, right? Because the Anthropocene, the short story of it is that, humans have messed up, humans have brought the world, and now we're creating sustainable development goals, still animated, brought on the Anthropocene in the first place. And so as feminists, how do we want to trigger our thinking, maybe in a way, right? Because it does have, it does captivate imagination, and has been used quite a bit. I mean, there was this documentary made that was quite powerful by Edward Burkinski and two others, with an exhibition and where it explains all of that images, some parts of the documentary. So, I mean, these kind of things, they trigger. So it might be a flawed concept. But can it be helpful anyway? Right? And I guess my example of Kaczynski and museum exhibits and news leads me to another question. So yes, it's a limited concept, but it's infinity. And better question. Of course, your could have been the landscape out there. But what about artistic contributions? I do find that there's a lot of artistic research and artistic that are exploring those perspectives that's in relation and whether it's issues, worldview, how to trigger that, right? So is that considered the way? I'm sure there would be difficulties in doing so, but to hear you on this, I see you nodding. So
that's definitely a great question. Not for this project. It's beyond my capacity, for sure. That's one thing. And although we are trying to publish, artistic contributions with the journal, we give extra, importance. We make an extra effort to do this. And mostly in each issue, one or two artistic contributions we published so far. So we are happy with it. But with this particular project idea, it was initially, just remember this, I forgot to mention it before. It's also related to your earlier question. This project was initially designed as posthumanism for sustainable design and engineering. This was the initial proposal. And I got runner-up position. I couldn't get the grant from another source. In the meantime, I realized that maybe we should first start with a general consideration of sustainability, because we don't know where we are in terms of these critiques, and this was also why we excluded a bunch of important work that links Anthropocene with posthumanism. Anthropocene thinking we criticize or we support, but apart from this, it's not part of the conversation at UN level. At least sustainability is understood, good or bad. We can criticize it, but it makes sense. When you talk about sustainability, it makes sense. So I also, I guess, saw it as a strategical priority. We can take a known subject, sustainability, and we can use it to explain an unknown subject, which is posthumanism. And I think so far it worked well. And of course, this should be complemented by artistic works, and of course, new works are also coming out. The repository, digital repository is therefore very important. And then the next step is also looking at the actual design practices, maybe post-human, more than human workshops can be organized to create a dialogue between designers and engineers with maybe digital humanities and post-humanities people. But I don't know, there are lots of opportunities when we think about it. And these opportunities related to the main questions we want to ask and address, and also available methodologies are being shaped by these initial questions and our purposes. Yeah, it will continue, just it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would very much like to see a posthumanism and design or urban design workshop of some kind, and certainly there are people that are really interested in as well. So homework for someone who is yes. I see in the chat. If there is from the audience, or maybe there is one. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, really, Ken. That's a really good question. I was quite haunted by the image of the unoccupied city and the notion of that sort of a dystopian image. And you said that the scholarship that's being to this is to this imaginary is transhumanist. And I just wanted if you could speak to that a little bit, to that imaginary around it. Of course, there are so many spaces have their own kinds of.
I didn't mention unoccupied city.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Something about the transhumanism here.
No,
transhumanism.
No, I mentioned the vision of the human city is being framed within the criticism of human understanding of the paper itself is a critical posthumanist. I could say critical humanist at least, but it doesn't look at posthumanist scholarship and just criticizing scholarship within its own terms.
Yeah.
This is a kind of this is a sign of lack of clarity in terms of the concept. I mentioned city.
Yes,
that's
exactly what I was thinking about, the city with no related.
This concept,
Yes.
That's why the article was also part of the corpus. But even if it was discussed without any reference to scholars. That was interesting. So everyone is tries to rediscover things, but we can do things easier and we can move forward. That's how we can create policy change. Otherwise we can just do it in our circles, in our own communities. That was the purpose of this example.
Well, the immediate image that came to mind was the documentary Wild Wild Country about
a group of people who moved to Oregon. The whole city was abandoned. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the questions, and also thank you, Çağdaş, for your presentation. We will, as per usual, upload the recording of the talk on the PRI YouTube channel, so you can revisit some parts of it, the slides with interesting, very interesting reports, very illustrative of what's happening and the dynamics of the field as a whole, if we want to say that. And also there will be, I will add information, links to your websites. So thank you very much for your attention.